The current narrative concerning the Roman general Vespasian portrays him as a military genius of low origins. The view of Vespasian is of a man who championed the poor against the rich to rise to power to become emperor, thanks to the support of the army and the essential gaining of influential networks whilst in Judea. Vespasian may indeed have been a great general, and currently there may appear to be no reason to doubt his presented genealogy. However, certain factors raise suspicion. Firstly, the Jewish War, a work produced by the man known to us as Flavius Josephus, was written after 70 CE, the same period as the Gospels, as agreed by scholars. The New Oxford Annotated Bible states that scholars generally agree that the Gospels were written 40 to 60 years after the presented death of Jesus. Further, Associate Professor at the University of Miami, Robin Faith Walsh, in her publication The Origins of Early Christian Literature, has stated that the Gospels are creative works produced by educated elites, interested in Judean teachings, practices, and paradoxographical subjects in the aftermath of the Jewish War. The second factor that needs to be considered is that although heated debates have taken place around this, the military campaign of Vespasian and Titus in Judea, as described by Josephus in the Jewish War, does parallel the ministry of the Jesus character in the Gospels. In fact, there are over 40 correlations between the Jewish War and the New Testament. Thirdly, only literary elites could have produced the kind of mythic style prose found in the New Testament texts, again as recently investigated by Professor Walsh in her publication. The fourth important factor to take into consideration is that the Roman Jewish War was a battle between the people of Judea and the aristocracy of Rome, as a result of the oppression suffered by the Jewish people under Roman rule. The people were led by a Jewish group called the Pharisees, who are mentioned 98 times in the New Testament and are depicted as the bad guys. The Pharisees had gained power over another Jewish group called the Sadducees, which was a class battle, and it caused great concern for the aristocracy of Rome. The Sadducees received their support from the aristocracy and, therefore, supported the monarchy, while the middle and lower classes followed the more democratic Pharisees, who were fighting for a much-needed change to the world. Basic human rights for the common people, an end to slavery within the Roman Empire, and a new governmental system based upon democracy. Problems arose for the Sadducean sect, consisting of high priests, aristocratic families, and merchants, because they were viewed as corrupt by the people, and the Hasmonean Jewish leaders showed support for the Pharisees, to a point where they had gained power over the Hasmonean leadership. Because the Pharisees had become so popular with the common people, it meant they had gained both public support and wealth from contributions from the public, because they were fighting on their behalf, which meant the Pharisees were running things. Once they had gained this authority and position of power, the enemies of the Pharisees called upon Rome's help to overthrow them and their influence. That is when Rome made Herod king of Judea, and so, in that sense, king of the Jews. The political power the Pharisees had came from influence, not authoritative governmental positions. This Jewish group did not consist of power-hungry elites. The Jewish scripture was the fuel propelling the Jews to fight, and most of the population of the empire had turned to Judaism, as evidenced by Seneca, who is quoted by the man known to us as St. Augustine, as saying, "When meanwhile the customs of that most accursed nation have gained such strength that they have now been received in all lands, the conquered have given laws to the conquerors." Seneca the Younger, who was a tutor to the Emperor Nero, was implicated in the Pisonian conspiracy to overthrow the emperor. In a work called Christ and the Caesars of 1877, a work heavily criticised at the time, Professor Bruno Bauer of Berlin University argued a link between the creation of the Gospel of Mark and the beginning of the writing of the Jewish War. Bauer even stated that the author of the Gospel of Mark was written by a Roman nourished by the spirit of Seneca, and Christianity is Stoicism triumphant in a Jewish garb, and Jewish theology from Philo of Alexandria developed by Josephus. Seneca's work can be seen as a source for several statements found within the New Testament. Examples are, "We tie knots and bind up words in double meanings and then try to untie them," and "The soul alone renders us noble." He also says, "God is near you, He is with you, He is within you," and talks about a Holy Spirit. He promotes a personal God as opposed to public gods, the idea of prayer, giving the perception that everyone is praying, and the concept of original sin. His ideological concepts include faith healing, ghosts, angels, and the ideas of heaven and Satan. Emperor Vespasian is portrayed in the ancient sources as pacifying the East and bringing peace to the empire. But how does this relate to his ancestry? Well, in an attempt to understand the genealogy of the man known as Josephus, a genealogy which has caused much trouble for many scholars, including historian and biblical scholar Steve Mason, who is recognised today as one of the leading authorities on Josephus. Sources documenting the Flavian dynasty and the Herodian and Hasmonean royal houses were investigated. What this led to was startling data showing Vespasian's descent from Herod the Great, and his connection by blood and marriage to the ancient Roman aristocratic family, the Calpurnius Pisos. Information regarding Vespasian's ancestry comes from the work of the individual known to us as Suetonius in his Lives of the 12 Caesars, a major source presenting biographies of Julius Caesar and the first 11 emperors of the Roman Empire. In the Lives of the 12 Caesars, Suetonius presents Vespasian's mother as being a woman called Vespasia Polla, and his grandfather, Vespasia Polla's father, being called Vespasius Pollio. However, as previously mentioned, when trying to uncover the true genealogy of the man known to us as Titus Flavius Josephus, by investigating documents detailing the Flavian, Herodian and Hasmonean families, suspicious data regarding Vespasian's maternal grandfather, Vespasius Pollio, comes to light. Josephus's genealogy can only be traced back through King Herod the Great and his first wife, Mariamne I, who was Herod's first wife as king. But when examining the data regarding King Herod the Great's family, suspicious similarities emerge regarding a grandson of Herod the Great, a man called Herod Pollio, and Vespasian's maternal grandfather, Vespasius Pollio. It is known within academia that a Jewish noblewoman called Queen Berenice and her brother King Agrippa II seem to have been treated very well by the Flavians. The reason could logically be viewed that, as is written, Agrippa II tried to convince the Jewish people that they could not win against the might of Rome. When this failed, he supported Rome in the war and fought in Vespasian's campaign. In a paper called The Army in Politics, in the Journal of Roman Studies, volume 47, G.E.F. Chilver provided evidence showing Vespasian's rise was orchestrated from the top, and Philip B. Sullivan stated in his paper, A Note on the Flavian Accession, that, on the basis of ancient sources, both literary and epigraphic, one might be justified in arguing that, while the evidence supporting the contentions as to Berenice's role is nowhere conclusive, there is no direct statement affirming her part, It is almost impossible to explain Vespasian's success without reference to the Herods and to Tiberius Julius Alexander, who we read was an equestrian governor and general in the Roman Empire. Born into a wealthy Jewish family in Alexandria, he abandoned or neglected the Jewish religion and became the chief officer or magistrate of Egypt in 66 to 69 CE. But regarding Vespasius Pollio and Herod Pollio, grandson of Herod the Great, when dates and family trees for Vespasius Pollio and Herod Pollio are compared, using a gathering of scattered data, they are very much alike, only with different names having been used, the indication being that they were the same person. Herod Pollio would become Herod, king of Chalcis, a territory north of Judea, when he became ruler of that area, under the Emperor Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus in 41 CE. Herod Pollio, born 10 to 9 BCE and died in 48 to 49 CE, was a son of Aristobulus IV, who was a son of Herod the Great and brother of Alexander, or Alexandros. Herod Pollio was taken to Rome after the death of Herod the Great and given the Praetorian rank, a high military rank in the Roman Empire, serving as the personal guard of the Roman emperors. The birth date for Herod Pollio is concluded from coinage found in modern Lebanon, the ages of the wives and sons, and information provided in Josephus' Antiquities. There, we read Agrippa I, brother of Herod Pollio, was in his 54th year when he died in the summer of 44 CE. If his 54th year began in the late 43 CE, his birth may be concluded as being in the late 11 BCE. Aristobulus IV returned from Rome in late 12 BCE, after being sent there at the age of 12 by his father Herod the Great, along with his brother, and died in 6 to 7 BCE. Herod Pollio is recorded as having 3 sons, one by his first wife Marianne IV, and 2 by his second wife, his niece Julia Berenice, born 28 CE. The son born to Marianne IV was called Aristobulus III, born around the 30 CE, who later became Aristobulus of Chalcis in 57 CE. With Julia, or Queen Berenice, Herod Pollio had 2 sons, Berenicianus and Hyrcanus, but no daughter is recorded from this marriage. Vespasius Pollio, whose wife is unnamed in history, is recorded as an equestrian from Nursia, who became a tribunus militum in a legion 3 times. Those of equestrian rank who served as military tribunes often became senators. The record also states him becoming a praefectus castrorum no earlier than the time of Emperor Augustus, who reigned 27 BCE to 14 CE. Vespasius Pollio is recorded as having a son and daughter. The daughter's name, as mentioned, is recorded as Vespasia Polla, or Pollia. Vespasius Pollio II is the name used for the son, although the name is not given in the historical record. Suetonius records that this son became a senator with the rank of praetor, a position of which exercised extensive authority in the government. Polla is described as being superior to her husband, Titus Flavius Sabinus I, in social position. Suetonius states he farmed the public tax of a 40th in Asia, and there existed for some time statues erected in his honour by the cities of Asia. It appears Vespasian's early education became the responsibility of Tertulla, his paternal grandmother. It appears then that his mother and father were away on business for long periods. When investigating the historical documentation further, we can find that a King Julius Tigranes VI of Armenia born before 25 CE, who was an apostate to Judaism and a Herodian prince who served as a Roman client king of Armenia in the 1st century, whose second reign was in 66 to 7 CE, married a noblewoman of Phrygia in Asia Minor. Her name is recorded as Galai, but we only learn of her existence through numismatic evidence of Tigranes' second kingship. In a paper called Tigranes IV, V, and VI New Attributions, in the American Journal of Numismatics Volume 2, Frank L. Kovacs suggests her inclusion on the coinage of Tigranes' second reign suggests a recent marriage or at least an enhanced importance. Tigranes' father was Gaius Julius Alexander, according to Josephus, the second-born son of Alexander and Glavra, making Tigranes' grandfather Alexander, son of Herod the Great and Mariamne I. Tigranes' grandfather, therefore, is the brother of Aristobulus IV, father of Herod Pollio. Tigranes, who was raised in Rome, is recorded as having a daughter called Julia, a Herodian princess who married a Roman senator called Marcus Plancius Varus of Pergae, the governor of Bithynia and Pontus under Emperor Vespasian. The name of this daughter was deciphered through the finding of a stone of the early 2nd century that records an offering by a Julia Ammia to an unnamed deity in the town of Falere in Etruria. Tigranes' son, Julia's brother, Julius Alexander, entered mainstream Roman politics between 90 and 110 CE by becoming a consul suffectus. Julia's and Julius's paternal great-great-grandparents were Herod the Great and Mariamne. This Julia looks to have the feminine form of her father's name, Julius, but of course it is also the same name as Julia Berenice, the second wife of Herod Pollio. But no daughter is recorded for the marriage of Herod Pollio to Julia Berenice. But of course there is a daughter recorded for Vespasius Pollio. If we now look again at the name of Tigranes' wife, Galai, an important point must be noted. Galai can be Gala, just as Mariamne can be Miriam, and Gala means the same as Polla, the feminine form of Pollio, which means cock, chicken, or rooster. That is, the same as Herod Pollio. If Tigranes' wife was the daughter of Herod Pollio, then the great-great-grandparents of Tigranes' daughter would be Herod and Mariamne I on both her father and mother's side. Interestingly, Julia's brother Gaius Julius Alexander, king of Cilicia, named his son Gaius Julius Alexander Berenicanus, and a possible remote descendant of this son has been suggested based on an inscription of Heliopolis, thought to be dated to the 2nd century CE. That inscription reads, Tiberius Claudius Antoninus Calpurnius Atticus Julius Berenicanus. The late scholar Edmund Groag also suggested in the publication Pauli Wasoa of Stuttgart, Volume 19, that Gaius Julius Alexander Berenicanus, presented on inscriptions of Ephesus and Laodicea, was a descendant of the Herodian house of Chalcis, that is, the family of Queen Berenice. But the question to answer now is, if Herod Pollio was the father of Galai, who was her mother? The name Galai may not appear to be particularly significant. However, in Part 2, I will present data and facts showing that this name is indeed vitally important in uncovering the royal ancestry of Emperor Vespasian. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Part 2.